Hello, I think I have begun streaming live. Today I don't have a second computer, so the computer that I'm looking at, the one that's on the green screen behind me, is actually my view of the live stream. And I'm here to make some videos about arrays and objects in JavaScript using the P5JS framework. I also thought Processing 3 came out yesterday, and so if anyone's actually watching in real time and wants to ask some questions about that, you're welcome to. I would just sit here and talk all about the new features of Processing 3, but I already made an entire video about that, which I will try to remember to put in the description. And now I have myself from a few minutes ago in some sort of like strange alternate wormhole universe. If you're watching and could tell me if the audio is reasonable, and now in a second, like the third version of myself is going to start, oh no. If you're watching and could tell me if the audio sounds good, that would be great. I'm also going to move over here, and if you could tell me that you can read this. Does that look reasonably focused and legible? I think that it does, because I can see on my kind of preview screen over there that it looks good. I should try to find an eraser. Oh, I don't have an eraser. I'm missing my eraser. Shoot, that's going to be a problem. Didn't prepare for that. I found it. Excellent. Okay, now I'm going to come over here and erase this. Okay, so let me check back over here. Is anybody watching? Sure, audio is clear. It is. Thank you very much. I will check the chat periodically, but first I will start by just kind of talking through the videos I'm going to make. So this is a live stream that maybe one or two people are actually watching, but someone might watch the recorded version. And what I'm going to do during this live stream is every once in a while hit a button and actually record a video that will then get saved as its own chunk and upload it to YouTube later. So I'm planning to make 6 videos, and I have 2 hours. Which I think if each video were 10 to 15 minutes seems kind of reasonable, although I might sort of run out of steam and get tired. So I would like to make a video that's just talking about what an array is in general, the syntax of an array. I'm going to make a video about, how to make an array. So I'll start with just like an array of numbers and an array of strings. I think that'll be good to start with. Then I'll look at making an array of objects with just kind of like a literal object in the array. And then a constructor function to generate objects. The idea of building up to this example here, where we have some bouncing ball objects. So that's kind of the plan. Then if I have some time, I'd really like to look at push, splice, how to add and remove things from an array. That's really useful. And how to deal with if you click on something, how to get that message to the object. And if objects are moving around the screen, how to have them kind of communicate their distance from each other. So I don't know, those 5 and 6, I wouldn't be surprised if I didn't get to, but those are kind of on my list in general. So if you have any feedback about this, please put it in the chat, or if you're watching the video later, you can put it in the comments. And I'm going to drink some water. This is my shtick, my magic invisible water. What's absurd about it is I sit here and watch myself doing this. I don't know. This is what I do with my life. Let me restart this, refresh. And I'm going to check that. I wish I had my second laptop in here because I could just have the chat open, but no one's there. There are 5 people watching. 5. That's very exciting for me. And that's about it. So I think I'm going to get started with the array video unless anyone has any... Yeah, any questions about Processing 3? Throw them in the chat. And I'm going to check the chat in between each chunk of video that I record. Okay, so here I go. So I got to minimize this. Say hi in the chat if you're here. It's useful. I am going to, I don't not have the list up, although, maybe I'll include this in the first video. Why not? Why not? Although, I don't know that I need this. And then I need the editor. I'll get the editor open in a second. Okay. Here we go. I'm going to start over here. Got to get this mouse going. Hello. I'm back for a new section. I can start over. Hello. I'm back for a new section of videos all about arrays. Now, lest you think it's really only all about arrays, this is actually also about objects, because objects are now so fundamental. And I'm gonna start this over. Where did I last leave off? I think I put a function in an object. So we'll get back, and I'll come back to that. Okay, that's fine. This is just gonna be about an array. Hello, I am back. This is gonna be a problem for me. Boy, let me fix this cable here that I'm gonna trip on. Oh, look at that. What did I do? If I go like this, did I make the screen do something weird? I don't know. It's fine. Green screen thing. Hello, I am back and I'm ready to start another little series of videos inside a larger series of videos, and the topic here is arrays. An array in JavaScript. What is an array? Why do you want to use one? What's the syntax for an array? What kind of things can you do with an array? And ultimately, I have a goal with this. So if you remember recently, in a previous video, it was actually a couple weeks ago when I recorded it, but who knows how you're watching these, I recorded a video where we looked at making an object as this collection of properties, this thing that maybe has an X and a Y and a color and a size, and then this idea that you could put a function inside the object. So that thing that has a bunch of properties you could issue commands to it, like move or draw yourself or change color. And so if you can get one object, like this object, which I'm now telling it to move and bounce and display itself as a circle, if I could take that single object, how could I easily duplicate that object every time I say click the mouse? Click, 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 click. The idea here, and I have this list of videos that I'd like to make all the way up to number 4, which will really go through all the pieces of this. So how does an array even work? To have a list of these objects? How do you then have the object in the array? How do you deal with making multiple copies of that object in the array? How do you deal with adding the objects to the array one at a time? These are all the pieces that I would like to get to, and then I have a few other topics like clicking, how to interact with an object by clicking or moving the mouse, or how to have two objects interact with each other. So this is the full scope of the videos I'd like to make. There are 6 of them. I'm hoping they'll each be about 10 minutes, and I'm going to get right started right now with the first one. What is an array? So let's move this out of here, and I'm going to come over here to my trusty whiteboard. It's very friendly to me. It talks to me because I talk to a whiteboard now. That's what I do. Camera, I used to talk to the camera, now I talk to the whiteboard. Okay, so what is an array? Why do you want to use one? Well, let's dial ourselves back to a happy, warm, and comfortable place. I could say something like var num equals 5. And it's very high on this whiteboard, but I think you can read it. This is comfortable. I have a variable, the name I made up for it is num, and its value is 5. So if I wanted to have a second one, I could add a second variable. But here's another way I could have a second number that I'm storing. Var nums equals square bracket 5, comma 3, end square bracket, semicolon. So an array is a list of values separated by commas, embedded inside of open and closed square brackets. This is not that dissimilar, strangely enough, to this idea we have of an object, which is a collection of name-value pairs, right, inside curly brackets. So both of these are collections. Lists in a way, lists of name-value pairs, lists of just values. And that distinction, I think, will become more and more clear, even though it seems like a little confusing right now, why to use one or the other, as I start to show you more and more uses of them in different examples. You'll see what that distinction is. But the key distinction right now that's super important is that the order of this list, the order of the array, is what matters. Elements in an array have an index. They're the first element, they're the third element, they're the last element, they're the element in the middle. That ability to have the elements in an order is the sort of crucial key aspect of an array. So for example, this is element, well, it looks like it's the first element, right? Because it's the first thing in the array and that's the second thing. But in programming, often it's you have to start counting. I'm like stuttering here because I'm afraid to tell you this news, but you have to start counting from 0. And actually, it's a wonderful thing to count from 0. Everyone in lots of scenarios, we should all just count from 0. It brings joy to the world, but it also brings a little bit of confusion. So this is index 0, and this is index number 1. It's kind of not that great of an example. Let's make a bigger array, 50, 71, 12. I could put a negative number in there, negative 22, right? This element now has this array has how many elements? 4 elements. What are its index values? 0, 1, 2, 3. So this is important. An array might have 4 elements in it, but the index values go from 0 to 3. So the total number of elements might be 4, 10, 20, 100. If there's 100 elements, the index values go from 0 to 99. Let's practice that. So right, I have an array with 10 things in it. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If you count from 0, you end with 9, you've got 10 things total. It seems silly to keep saying that, but it's something that it's a mantra you repeat to yourself to get used to this idea of counting from 0 with an array. So this is the syntax. Now let's go and put this syntax into an actual P5 example and see what we might do with that. Okay, I'm back over here now, and I'm at like 5 minutes. So that's good. Let's see how far I can get. So ignore this example. I'm making a new project. I'm going to move it over here, and I'm going to save it as arrays1. Okay, so at the top, I'm going to say var nums equals 100, 25, 12, 72. So there are 4 values in my array up there. And I'm going to make a canvas. That's 400, 400. And just for comparison's sake, I'm going to add a regular variable now that has the number 23 in it. And something that I might do with a regular variable is just say ellipse at 100, 200, and I might use that variable for its size. So you can see here, I now have this variable with the value 23. That variable is being used for the width and height of the ellipse, and that ellipse is drawn there with a width and height of 23 pixels. So the next job that I would like to do here is how do I get one of the numbers from the array and use one of the numbers from the array in something, like the size of an ellipse, the location of an ellipse, the color of the ellipse. How do I pull values out of an array? So that comes back over here to the indices, the index values. So if, for example, this is the array, var nums equals this, if in my code I ever say nums, I'm referring to the entire array. But it's not that often that you refer to the array as a whole. More likely, you'd refer to the individual elements of the array one at a time. So the way to do that is, again, with square brackets. So if I say nums index 2, that means I'm referring to this value, 12, and this evaluates to the number 12, just like num evaluates to the number 5. So again, this is a list of variables. Each one of these, you refer to the array name and its index. Okay, now back over here, we can now do that. So I can say, let's draw a second ellipse a little bit over, and let's draw it at nums index 2. Nums index 2. Now, which one is index 2? It's not the second one in the list. It's 0, 1, 2. It's 12. Let's make it a little bigger. Let's make that one 46. That's a nice number. It's an age I will be someday. Someday kind of soon. Not that soon, but soon. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, so you can see this now I have a second circle with a width and height of 46 pixels as opposed to the first circle with a width and height of 23. Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, I forgot a whole video, which is, I've got to look at how to do this with a for loop, but that'll be the next video. So this is one example, and I think I'm going to make another example right now, and we'll come back to this one in the next video. So one of the things to realize here that I think is exciting and interesting about arrays is that this number does not have to be the index value that I'm using into the array. It doesn't have to be a hard-coded value. It could be a dynamic value, something that's picked randomly or through some algorithm. So let's take a look at that. And I'm going to save this as arrays2. And I'm going to change this to words. And I'm going to make some words like rainbow and heart and what are some other nice words? Purple I like, and friendship. And this is all I can think of. So I have an array. So first of all, the thing that I'm emphasizing here is you can put anything into an array. You can put strings, text into an array, numbers into an array, objects into an array. That's what I'm getting at soon enough. So what might I do with this array? Well, I might say, all right, fill 255, use the P5 text function. I want to draw some text onto the screen. And I'm going to say draw, like for example, if I just say draw a rainbow onto the screen at 212, and maybe I make it a little bit bigger so we see it. 32 pixels, the font size. You can see, oops, I don't know where I put that. 200 pixels over. I meant to put it like 12 pixels over and 200 pixels down. You can see there's the word rainbow appearing in the sketch. Wonderful. So, ooh, look at this. I made a blue mass there. Whoa, magic. I just hard-coded rainbow here. Now I want to pull something from the array. So what I want to say is, aha, what I want is words index 0. I want that first index into the array. And there we go. I have rainbow. Now if I change this to 2, I see the word purple. So the point that I'm making is this number could be a variable. What if I say var index equals 0 and put index here? And now what if I say function mouse pressed index equals index plus 1? So the camera just went off, so hopefully this one's not going to go off in a second. But so what's happening now? The value of index is 0, so I'm seeing words index 0, I'm seeing rainbow. But as soon as I click the mouse, index will become 1, and I should see heart. And then I should see purple, and then I should see friendship, and then I should see, oh, an error message, right? So this is a key thing. No one's going to save you if you try to access an element into an array that doesn't exist. If I say words index 27, it doesn't exist, it's null or undefined or some sort of JavaScript thing that doesn't exist yet, and you won't be able to draw that onto the screen and you'll get an error. So it's up to you to build logic into your code to protect yourself. For example, I could say, hey, you know what? If index equals 4, maybe I should reset index back to 0. So as I'm and it's not 4, right? Oh yes, it is 4, right? Because 0 exists, 1 exists, 2 exists, 0 exists, 1 exists, 2 exists, 3 exists, but not 4. So now if I run that, you'll see it cycles back to 0 every time I get to 4. But what if I go up here and add, love into this array? So I don't ever see love because I stopped myself at 4, and now there are actually 5 elements in the array. So how do I deal with that problem? Well, one way to deal with that problem would be to just change this number 4 to the number 5. But an interesting thing that will come up again and again is that arrays also store properties about themselves. So in addition to be able to access individual elements of the array, we can access other information about the array itself, such as the current length of the array. So that the length actually can change as the program's running. For example, what if we got user input and started filling that array with words from the user? So one thing I can do here is actually dynamically check if the index equals the length of the array, right? Remember, we're going up by 1, so if there's 4, the valid indices are 0, 1, 2, and 3, but the 0, 1, 2, and 3, but the invalid index is 4. There are 4 elements, but 0 through 3 are the right index values. I have to repeat this to myself because it hurts a little bit to have this little minor point of confusion. Okay, so let's test this and see if this works. 1, 2, 3. So what I might suggest to you is do this same thing. Make a list of words. What if you have them picked randomly each time you run the sketch or each time you click the mouse? Try to use an array of colors. Could you pick a random color for a bunch of different shapes you're drawing on the screen? So what's a kind of list of information that you might use for an element that you're drawing, and what's a way that you might pick from that list, either one at a time or randomly or 2 at a time? Come up with a little exercise for yourself, and in the next video what I will show you is how to march through every element in the list. How would you display all of the words? How would you use all of the values for the sizes of the ellipse? Okay, so this marks the end of this first video about arrays, and there will be more like the next one I'll record in just a minute. Okay. Stop. Okay, so that's the end of that video. Let me check the live stream, see if anybody has any questions. You're watching, loud and clear, audio is clear. I'm a vampire. I look exactly the same as the videos recorded years ago. It is true, but I'm a very nice vampire. I don't bite. But I do apparently live in this like wormhole time universe where I could clone myself over and over again. Anybody have any questions about arrays or what I recorded, or any comments or feedback? Say them now before I go to the next one. I'm going to come over here I'm going to erase this. You know, it's funny, this camera is off so you can't see me. I used to actually be a vampire in this room because I had this like horrible curtain that covered the shade, because I thought, oh, I have lights in here, it needs to be consistent lighting for the green screen. This is this like cave with no sunlight all day long. It was horrible. So now I have light coming in. And you know what? The light works with the cameras too, because daylight is good. Okay, I'm gonna check the chat again real quick. Loud and clear, feedback loop. Okay, so I'm gonna go on and do the next video, which is about, which is about a for loop. I have to put this away because it's freaking me out, which is about, oh, whoops, I was just gonna see how we're doing, which is about using an array with a for loop. Okay, but before I record it, let me start with just putting something here, come back over here. Okay. Okay, great. And I'm going to come over here, and I want to go back to arrays 1, and close this one. Give myself some more room here. I will check the chat again real quickly just to see if there's any comments. There's never any comments. I don't know why I keep checking it. And then I'm about ready to do the next video, which I will drink a little water. And wipe my mouth. And then I will sing, vocalize. See, there's this moment where I think, because I'm not really recording the video, that this is not, no one's really watching, but this is getting archived. But no one will ever be watching this. Okay. Okay, so this is the second in a series of videos about arrays. And what I would like to look at in this video, yes, I'm in the right place, is this particular piece of code and augmenting it a little bit. So let's look at this for a second. And I've got this sketch here that's drawing 2 circles. So before I was demonstrating, here's a single variable. I can just use that single variable directly and draw a circle with the value of that variable as the width. Or I can access an individual element in the array via its index, 0, 1, 2. So this ellipse has a diameter of 46 pixels. So what I would like to do is I'm going to get rid of this, which was just for showing the difference between a variable and an array. And what I'm going to do is say, okay, well, let's actually draw all these ellipses. Use all the values in the array. So I'm going to start at 100 and use, the 0 element. Then I'll go to 200 and use the index 1 element. Then I'll go to 300 and use index 2. You know, a little bit of copy pasting. And we can see here, 200, 300, 400. I should probably make the canvas 500 pixels wide and run this. And look at that. Wonderful. I have 4 ellipses, each with a diameter using a value from the array. The first value is 100, the second one's 25, the third one's 46, and the fourth one's 72, and those ellipses look like they're right. So you can see here that I can use every element of the array and repeat the same thing over and over and over again with the elements of the array. And with a little copy pasting, it works just fine, and everybody's happy. You do a little dance, like the little like my CodeWorks dance, and there you go. But there's a problem here. This works with 4, but if you had 400, you won't be happy dancing. You'll be copying, pasting, you'll have carpal tunnel syndrome, and things will be very uncomfortable in your life. However, there is a solution to this problem, and you might remember it from, you might remember me from a previous video, the for loop video. So we could use a loop, right? A loop is a method for counting and repeating a task. And you can see here that this line of code is repeated. It's really the same line of code every time. The only things that are different are the X location and the index into the array. So let's come over here and let's look at let's remind ourselves, whoever we are. I'm going to remind myself, and maybe you're watching, what a for loop is. So I could write for. And then I could say var I equals 0. I could say I is less than 4, I plus plus. Now I should mention there's no actual requirement that you use the variable named I. It's just sort of a convention. You could say J or N or cat or apple. It doesn't matter. This is a variable name that you're making up. And the way a for loop works, that camera went off. fix that. The way the for loop works is if you start with 0, then you check to see if 0 is less than 4, you execute a task, go up by 1, check to see if it's still less than 4, execute a task, go up by 1, check to see if it's still less than 4, execute a task, go up by 1, check to see if it's less than 4. You know, by the way, if it's not less than 4, you're done and stop executing that task. So if I were to say something like print ln I right here, I would start at 0. I is less than 4, so I would see 0 printed out. You know, if this is the console, I would see 0 appear in the console. Then I would go up by 1. I would be 1. 1 is less than 4. It would get printed out. I would go up by 1. 2 is less than 4. Then it would go up by 1. 3 is less than 4. Then it would go up by 1. 4, aha, 4 is not less than 4. The loop would exit. So this is the result that I see. This line of code executes 4 times. First with the value 0, then with the value 1, then with the value 2, then with the value 3 in I. Look at this over here. I'm coming back to you. Over here, this line of code executes 4 times. First with the value 0, then with the value 1, then with the value 2, then with the value 3. Right? Exactly what we did here. So there's no reason why I couldn't instead say for var I equals 0, I is less than 4, I plus plus, and then take this line of code and say I and I. Remember, the index into an array can be a variable. So let me comment this out. And you can see I'm making the case to you that this is 100%, except for one thing that I forgot, which we'll fix in a second, equivalent to this. This, I wrote each line of code out manually typing in the index, 0, 1, 2, 3. Here, this line of code is being repeated 4 times, and the index is dynamic. It's 0, it's 1, it's 2, it's 3. So I should see 4 ellipses in the window, just like we had before, right? I see kind of like a couple, and I don't really know what's going on there. Let me add something here. Let me say stroke 255 and no fill. Let's try to look at what's going on. Okay, so this really did work. Wow, I really sized those in such a lovely way. But there are 4 circles there, and one is 100 pixels wide, one is 25 pixels wide, one is 46, one is 72. The issue is they're all in the same location. So here, notice how x changed, 100, 200, 300, 400, but x doesn't change here. It's 100 for each one. How do we deal with that? Well, interestingly enough, if I come back over here, these values I had, 0, 1, 2, 3, what if I were to multiply each one of these values by 100? What would I get? And let me give myself a little more space here and get rid of this. I would get 0 times 100 is 0. 1 times 100 is, say it with me, even though we're not together, but just do it, equals 100, 200, 300. So that's close. 0, 100, 200, 300. What did I have? 100, 200, 300, 400. I know. Let's add 100 to each of these. If I add 100 to each of these, that means I have 100, 200, 300, 400. So by multiplying by taking that index value, multiplying it by 100, adding 100, I have the values that I want. So even though I'm using it to count through the indices of an array, it's just this counting number. I can use it for good, for other purposes. So here we go. I could say, instead of drawing them at 100, I could say I times 100 plus 100. And now if we run this, I kind of want to have them have a little more weight to them. I'll make them kind of grayish inside. You can see there are my 5 circles. This worked. This is a way of using an array to have many elements, but applying the same action to all of those elements. And if you remembered, this is kind of where I began. If these things were objects, not single numbers, and I had 1,000 of them, I could just say display all of them, move all of them, run all of them. And that's the topic that I will explore in the next video. For now, I might say just make that array of strings, perhaps. See if you can display 5 different words in some pattern on the screen. make a color palette, right? You have 6 colors, and all the things you're drawing, you always pick a random color for a bunch of those things. Actually, that's what I said before. Loop through and draw. I know. Make another array with colors for each one of these and use the color for it. Although in that sense, I almost would rather use an object for that. But you get the idea. Like, make a little riff off of this as an exercise. But really, I think the goal that you might have in your mind is, as you start to have multiple parameters for things you're drawing on the screen, maybe those should be inside objects, because object is a collection of properties. Okay, that's the end of this video, which is 8 minutes long, which I feel like is a victory in some way. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, that's the end of that one. Let me come back to the chat and figure out what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm happy to take, I have stereo sound. So I'm reading the comments now. You're doing great, thank you. Good vocal exercises. An intro to JavaScript for experienced Java coders. Yes, I would love to do that. I feel like that's a whole video topic. I'm trying to see, I should write that down. I have a little area here where I make notes about videos that I could make, so I'm just going to say that. So JavaScript for Java, yeah, so I think it could be useful to have like one quick, like, hey, you're a processing user, how do you do JavaScript? Or vice versa, actually, because in a way, a lot of people are starting now with JavaScript and might want to do like faster, full screen, kind of more intensive graphics applications, which the new version of Processing 3 is really well suited for. So moving back and forth between those two, I think, would be useful. And yes, you can ask something about processing libraries. I'm only checking the chat in between making these videos. So if you put the question out there, I'll check it and answer it. You have to wait till my ramblings end at 10 minutes. But I should do some of these live streams where I only take questions. But I haven't really gotten an audience asking a lot of questions yet. And maybe I need to schedule this better or something like that. But yeah, put the question here. So let me go back to my notes for a second to see where I am. So I did what is an array, and actually I forgot I had another video here, which is like array with a for loop. And now I can do an array of objects next. So that's going to be the next topic. So what I need to do is go back to, what I need to do is go find the example that I started with, which is somewhere, did I lose P5? Yep. Where am I at? 2:30, this is good. Oh, I'm going to turn the air up. It gets very hot in here with these lights. And if I turn the air up right now while I'm in between shooting, how bad is the audio when the air conditioning's on? I'd be curious for one of you to tell me. I'm wasting energy here. I'm not doing a good job of being my sustainability man. Okay, so let me hit open, objects, bubble. I think this is the sketch that I started making with a single object. Right, bubble.move, bubble.display. Yep, that's it. So this, I think, will work in terms of duplicating it. So I'm going to do something in this video which I'm not so sure about, which I'm going to demonstrate putting the object into an array using object literals, and then I will move to a constructor function, which is probably, and I'm going to do some things that are perhaps not considered quote-unquote proper JavaScript syntax, but I like to do things that look nice and feel easy and accessible and friendly. And you can always worry about that proper JavaScript syntax if somebody's paying you to write code that way. If you're just learning, make it work, enjoy it, and not have it be too horrible. Okay, so I think this will get me started. However, I also want to open up this one, objects click with mouse. I think we need to I need to do a little quick reminder of this one. And let me check the chat one more time. Yeah, that's good. So the question about is there a process for keeping P5.js and processing APIs in sync? That is a great question. So a lot of the same people are working on both projects, and there is definitely a lot of communication between the two projects. But I think something that's really important here is there is not this desire to keep them perfectly in sync. P5.js is not a port of processing. It's a new project building on the philosophies and ideals behind processing. So if something works differently on the web and makes sense because the web and JavaScript in the browser is a different context, the syntax will just be different. So knowledge-wise, this is something that I think through documentation and community can be, what are those differences? Why do those differences exist? That's an important topic. But there is not a process for like keeping them in sync on purpose, but there should be a lot of communication and documentation around why those differences exist. Okay, that was my answer to that. It's really like I like talk randomly and then I go into my like official talking mode. Answering question. Okay, I'm gonna drink a little water. This is good. I think if I can get through, I also have like a coffee drink. And I am going to minimize this repetitive screen and get ready to do, and I think it's a little bit too much in here. Let me see if I can make this code a little bit simpler for right now. And okay, so yeah, okay. Okay, I think I'm ready. Sorry, I'm like thinking and pausing. The stream has been going for 50 minutes. I made 2 videos, one about 12, one about 8. That's pretty good. Okay, I gotta get started here. So I'm gonna just come over here for a second. I think I probably should erase this. I think. Yeah. Okay, let's erase this. And come back over here. I need the pen. And turn the AC back down to low. And get ready to record. I feel like I have to burp. I mute the microphone for a second. It'll just come out in the middle of the video, it's fine. It's like an air bubble floating through me. Okay, here we go. Okay, so now I've made 2 videos. One just about what is an array and the syntax of an array, and the other video looking at how to use a loop to iterate over every element in that array. And in this video, I want to unlock this great power to you, which is how to take an object and duplicate that object many times into an array. So first, this is again, just to revisit, this is what I'm talking about. How would you make an example like this happen? And you know, each one of these objects, it needs to have a position on the screen. It needs an XY. It needs to have a speed, like how fast is it moving along the y-axis. It needs to have some functionality, like move along the y-axis, like check if it hit the bottom. So each one of these needs its own set of properties and its own set of functionality. And that's what I covered in a previous video, how to put a function into an object. And so we have an example of that here, right? This is a bubble object. And let me just actually take a moment to review over here just that syntax. So if I have an object like var bubble, an object is a collection of name-value pairs. An object has properties. Each property has a name, then there is a colon, then there is the value. And typically, we think of these, or I think of these as, what do I think of them as? Just as like numbers, right? It has an X, and its number is 100. And it has a Y, and its number is 50. But in addition to having these properties just be like simple variables with values, an object can have the name can be a function, like the name can be something like display, sorry, and the value can be a function. I'm just tripping over my words here, right? So this is what makes objects really powerful. It's not just a collection of numbers or data or strings or colors. It's also the ability to use those properties and execute some code with those properties. So for example, if I want to have a display property, I might want that to be a function. Now it's important to realize this function is not being executed. This is just the definition of the bubble object, and the display function is a function that could be executed later. And if that function were to be executed, it would draw an ellipse at, and this is the tricky thing, your instinct might be to write bubble.x, right? Because the way that you access properties of an object is by the name of the object dot the name of the property, and then you get the value back. But here, because I'm inside the object, there's a special JavaScript keyword that you can use to refer to the name of the object, the specific object, this object. What I want to do is refer to right here this particular object. Guess what? The keyword is this. You might think of it as me. I am the bubble. My x, that type of thing. So this x and this y. And this is probably one of the things in for me, I just forget to type that all the time. And sometimes things don't work, sometimes I get an error message. So it's really important that you remember to type that. So this is the syntax we're starting with. And if you see over here, it's basically exactly the same syntax. I happen to have a bit more sophistication here. I have both a display function and a move function. And then, if I come down here, you can see, aha, in draw, the bubble moves, the bubble is displayed. So I don't have any of this code anymore just in the wind. Like I don't have variables lying around, and I don't have lots of code in draw. I've kind of made this mini program, this bubble, and now I've got it in draw. So that was a quick little couple-minute review of objects and syntax. But the point of this is not just to be happy about this object. I want to make more than one. So certainly a strategy to make more than one would be copy paste this whole thing. But this is not good strategy, and I could change the number and change some things. This is not going to sustain you for very long. Although it's not the worst thing to practice with when you're first getting started, make a couple objects. Instead, what I want to do is I want to say var bubbles equals bracket bracket. I want to have an array of bubbles. And I want to put objects in those bubbles. So now, one thing I didn't actually mention in my previous video is not normally, but in the previous example I said make an array and put these numbers in it, or put this text in it. This is actually an empty array. So I'm starting the array as empty. And one of the interesting things about JavaScript is if the array is empty and you just assign something to the first spot, and then assign something to the second spot, and then assign something to the third spot, JavaScript will just I'm going to figure out what you're doing, and I'll just make the array the right size for what you're putting in it. So I could quickly do something like this, bring this object definition into setup and say bubbles index 0 equals that object. So now, oh my God, the blue, the blob is back. I got to fix that in my green screen settings. This blob takes over once in a while and tries to eat me, and I don't want it to because I want to make more videos. I guess I do. I don't know if I should. But so what was I saying? Yes, index 0. So I've put an object into the first spot in the array. The array now has a bubble object in it. And actually, I could say print line bubbles just to take a look at it. And you can see, oops, I forgot that I have this extra code in here that I'll comment out for a second. Print line bubbles, and you can see there it is. There's the array. It's got one object in it. Now, I'm going to just note a weird little nuance to JavaScript. What if I decided, I'm going to put this in the fourth spot, index 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. I haven't put anything in the first spot or the second spot or the third spot. What's going to happen? So if I do that, you'll notice that JavaScript, it just wants to figure out what you mean and what are you trying to do? Let me try to guess something. And strange enough, it made an array with 4 elements in it, but the first 3 are null. So JavaScript has a lot of flexibility in how you assign things into an array. I can't think of a good reason why you would do this. You're sort of asking for trouble, and you're going to run into errors later when you try to access a value that has null. Hi, blue blob. But it's important to realize that JavaScript is very flexible about how you put things into an array. So let's go back to putting it in the 0 spot. And then what do I need to do? Well, down here, what I want to do is I don't have an individual variable named bubble anymore. Get a little closer in here. What I want to do is say, move the 0 element of the array. Display the 0 element of the array. So now I just want to refer to the array and the specific object in the array. Good. So let's run this. And you can see we have exactly what we had before, this single object moving around the screen. So I haven't used the power of objects in arrays yet. I've just taken that single object and put it in the first spot in an array. And I can make a little bit of an improvement down here to draw. Even though there's only one thing in the array, maybe it would be good for future use later to have a little loop where I just check and I loop through the length of the array. Right? And this picks up from the previous video. The previous video, I looped through every number to set, I I loop through every number in an array to set the width of an ellipse. Here, right, and now I'm going to do is say, no matter how many bubbles are in this array, go from 0 to the length of the array, up by 1 each time, use that value as the index, move and display all the bubble objects. So this, it doesn't matter if there's 5 or 10 or 2, this loop will always apply this logic, move or display to every object in the array. And there we go. There's only one. I only put one object in the array. So how do I put the second object in the array? Okay, well, I could copy paste this and say bubbles index 1, but there's got to be a better way, right? What I can do instead is, why not put a loop around this? I don't know, how many times should I loop? 4 times? And then, right, what I can do is now, as I'm looping 0, 1, 2, 3, I'm going to put an object in the 0 spot, put an object in the 1 spot. So this same code that made that individual object, I can reuse that multiple times. 1 time, 2 times. So now the array, by the way, if I say print line bubbles here, you can see, look at that. There are 4 objects in the array, and they're all 4. Hopefully they won't get eaten by the blue mass. They're all 4 moving around the screen. I don't know, I could make 400 of them. That's a lot of bubbles. Look at that, they're all kind of starting in the center. What could I do differently? Well, one thing I can do is give them a random starting value between 0 and the width. And I could give them a random starting value, y value between 0 and height. So one thing that you can also notice, in addition to having functions as properties or values as properties, you can execute code that evaluates to a value. It's a little bit weird because like this has code in it and that has code in it. The difference is random is being executed right now and evaluating to a number that's being assigned to x. Here, this code is not being executed right now. It's being defined as something in a function that could be executed later. When is it executed? It's executed down here when I loop through all the elements of the array. So if I run this, you can see there's my 400 bubbles, and we can see this down here is like, this is what actually is in that array. So I'm going to take that print out. It's not particularly useful to look at it in the console there anymore. But you can see I could just go crazy now, and I could make 4,000 of them. Now, one thing that's important to realize is there's a limit to how much you can draw in P5 and how fast it's going to run. So the sketch is now running very slowly because it's trying to draw 4,000 circles every frame. But what's amazing about this is I haven't changed anything in the code but this number. This is the only number that controls how many objects are on the screen. So by changing, this is the amazing power of the modularity and reusability of objects. So this program is modular in that there is this object that has these parts, its properties, its functions. I know which part to edit when I want to change how it looks or change how it moves, and it's reusable. This single block of code is being used 4 times or 400 times to make many objects, and all I need to do down here is loop through all the objects and say, apply the same command to all of them, move all of them, display all of them. Now you'll notice that the editor here, the P5 editor, has this little yellow highlighted line number. It's a little bit, I'm afraid to look at it. I'm gonna look at it. Let's do this together. Ooh, it says don't make functions within a loop. So I've upset the editor. I'm very sorry, but it's like complaining that the style of my JavaScript isn't proper style. The truth of the matter is, maybe this is a bad idea for a number of reasons, but at the same time it works, and this is a great way to practice. But the thing is here, this maybe could be improved in the sense that I set up code has all this code in it, and this bubble is very simple. What if this bubble got more and more complex? So in the next video, what I want to do is look at a technique for taking the way this object is made and taking it out of here and putting it in something called a constructor function. Here I'm just literally making the bubble object, but what if I had this other function whose job it was to make bubble objects for me, and I could just call that function anywhere from in the code, and I would be able to just say, make a new bubble and set up. And again, life is just about making your code shorter. It's really not about that. Life is about people and relationships. And code doesn't really matter. But I guess you can use it for something. I'm using it for something, talking to a camera about it. Okay, so I just make the same lame joke in every video. You're tolerating it. This video is now over. I should be cut off. Okay, so that's what I want to do in the next video. I want to look at how can we work with this thing called a constructor function, which is perhaps a bit more typical, what you'll see in a lot of the examples on the P5 website. If you look at other types of examples of making objects with JavaScript, you might see this style in other places as well. Okay, so if you watch the end of this video, I thank you, and I will see you in the next one, or I mean, I'll see myself in the next one, I guess. Okay. Okay, so that's the end of that video. Oh my God, I've done 3 so far in less than an hour, which I think is pretty good. Let's see if I have any comments. Oh, nobody has any. It's 13. My audience is growing to 13 people. It's amazing. Okay, so if you have any questions or any feedback, if something doesn't sound right, I'm going to turn the air on a little bit higher and interfere with the audio a little bit, but this is in between my recording. Please let me know, and I'm going to look at the constructor function in the next video, and I'm going to cycle the cameras so they don't shut off. So this basically, I don't know if you're an ITP student and you happen to be taking ICM, that's how far I kind of got in class this week, and now I want to try kind of going a step further and looking at the constructor function. So I have to think about this. Okay, so first of all, let me erase this. Oh, I'm not you. I'm over here. Anybody have any? Oh, this camera is off. Anybody have any feedback, any comments, any questions? I will take them now. I will check the chat in a minute. I'm going to look over. I'm over here looking at the chat. Still nothing. So I think I'm ready for the next video. Let me check, see how I'm doing with terms of my notes. Uh-oh. Oh, no, that's okay. Let me see how I'm doing in terms of my notes. Where am I? So I'm on video number 4, constructor function to make objects, which involves passing parameters. It should probably include something. I probably should do it first without passing parameters, then by passing parameters. I think I might have to kind of like gloss over all of the details of this, because I feel like I want to try to do this in a succinct and simple way. And then I can get to push. So I'm going to remake this exact example, but with the constructor function. And then I'll do another video where, that'll be the passing the parameters, perfect, where I have to initialize, I got it, perfect. So 2 videos, one remaking this exact example with the constructor function, and another one where you add the objects one at a time by clicking the mouse, and add the objects one at a time by clicking the mouse, and you have to pass mouse X, mouse Y in order to generate the object, so I get some parameter passing there. Right? That's good. Okay, check for any last feedback. Are you limiting your videos to 10 minutes for YouTube? I don't know why I'm limiting my videos to 10 minutes. I feel like if it's too long, I'm doing something wrong. I feel like it would be better for the Microphone battery died. Oh, that's so sad. Mic battery died. Going to replace it. Very sad. Lost that whole video. That is true. Oh, wait. Oh, it came back briefly. I guess the battery, like it died, but it's like not totally dead, so I turned it back on. How far in that video could you hear the sound? Just like a couple minutes? Shoot. I'm gonna have to do that whole one again, which is fine. It's not like I... Okay, sound is back. If anyone's listening, how far did I get in that video? Just before. Okay, no, I know. It's just before I started recording. I'm just going to look at the video. You guys will. I'm going to, I think I don't know if you can't see what I'm doing now, but I am, this last one, I'm looking at where it has sound. Let's see if I can. Hold on a sec. Wait, there's no sound in this video at all. I guess I'm going to re-record the whole thing over again. It sucks. Okay. It's just, you know what? It probably doesn't hurt because I'll think of that as a rehearsal. I was feeling so good that I got it. Yeah, cut out between videos. Oh, that was nice of guys. That's the problem with the way that I'm doing this and not really looking at the chat. But I really appreciate that you guys tried to warn me. And I replaced the battery in one. This one has 2 bars, so I think it's going to be fine for a while longer. Let me regroup here. I'm going to turn on some air because it's getting very hot in here. It's really too bad because that was actually the one topic that... and I will, I'm going to regroup here. This is so perfect, but it's okay. It's okay. I can do this again. That was 12 minutes out of my life that I can repeat. No problem. Audio is still working. The thing is, like, I should really be able to see this because I have a preview monitor and it's showing the audio levels. So I often look and check, but I just didn't check. Okay, so let me get back to where I was, and I have to, you know what the funny thing is, not so funny, but I forgot to save these as separate examples anyway. So I'm undoing a bit here to get back to the beginning. I should have saved this as a previous version. Ooh, it's not. There we go. That's what I had before. And I want to save this as bubble array. I'm going to save it as bubble array constructor function. Okay, well, at least now I saved my code. And I'm checking here. Drink a little bit of water. I'm going to do this again in just 1 minute. You guys are patient. I have a rock in my shoe. It's going to fix that. It's uncomfortable. Here I am. This was in my shoe. Put it over here. I don't know where that came from. Now my shoelace is stuck. This is like, this is riveting live streaming on YouTube, I'm sure. Man in his office by himself takes rock out of shoe. I think this is performance art, perhaps. Okay, so I'm about to re-record a video about the constructor function. There are actually some parts in the video that I got confused that I think I could probably improve on anyway, so I'll try to look at this as like the blessing in disguise thing. And I'm gonna minimize the chat. Well, I can see the audio. Everybody can hear me now, right? Okay. And I wonder how long the delay is before I say something and you see it. I think it's probably about 30 seconds. Let me see. I'm going to clap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah, 14, 15 seconds. I don't know if I was counting seconds accurately. I could have looked at like a clock or something. Okay. Sound is good. Thank you, guys. Here we go. Minimize this. Nose. I like picking my nose, wiping my nose. Okay, turn the air back down. And coming over here. Let's go around here and drink a little more water. Okay, here we go. I have to collect my thoughts for a second. So what I'm doing now is the last thing we did is we made the object in the array, the literal object, and now I want to talk about why you would use a constructor function, what the syntax for the constructor function is, and change the code. Got it. Okay. Check the chat one more time. Check the chat. Check the chat. Don't want that to happen again. Okay, nothing is there. Excellent. Here we go. Okay, this is an exciting moment. I'm about to make a video about something that I have not ever made a video about before, and that is the constructor function in JavaScript. So what is the constructor function? What is a constructor function? What is the syntax for it? Why do you want to use it? How does it have to do with objects? How does it relate to anything we've been looking at so far? And so let me review where I kind of ended up off that last video. So in this last video here, oh, look at this. Hold on, sorry. Why is the warning gone? It's funny how that warning is now gone. I'm going to have to start this video over, which is fine. It's funny how that warning was there before. Okay, I don't care. Sorry, here I go. I'm starting again. Okay, so I'm making a video, a new video about a topic that I don't need to say that. I just said that before, but it's silly. This video is about the constructor function in JavaScript. Now this is a tricky and confusing topic. It relates to how you generate objects, and it's a different style than what I showed you in the previous video with a literal object being made into an array. And in fact, it's probably, and I hate to use this term, a slightly better style. It's a more flexible style. It will afford you some possibilities and get past some limitations that are here. So let's first talk about why do we need this other step before we even talk about what that other step is, the constructor function. So there's a couple reasons. So this example, first of all, it has an array, an empty array. In setup, it puts 4 objects into the array. There are those objects. And then in draw, it calls functions on those objects. Display the objects, move the objects. So where does this break down? There's a couple ways this breaks down. Number one is it's a lot of code here in setup. This is a simple object. It just has an x, a y, and 2 functions. But you could imagine you could have an object with 10 properties, 15 properties, 5 functions, 6 functions. You don't really want like all this code inside of this loop and setup. It's sort of hard to manage and keep track of. So number one, it'd be nice if we could move this somewhere else. And kind of if you're thinking like, oh, I know, I could move it into another function. That's basically what we're going to do. We're going to move it into a special kind of function called a constructor function. The other reason why you might need a constructor function is you might want to make new objects in different places in your code. So you might want to start this program with 4 objects, and then every time you click the mouse, you get a new object. And so you need the literal object in setup when you make 4, and then you also need that in mouse press when you make another one. So you suddenly, this code, the whole point of it was to not have to write it again because it's inside a loop. What if you need to do it later or somewhere else in the code? if you have the constructor function, that constructor function is reusable. So the purpose of the constructor function is a special function to make the object for you. So it's really like, this is making the object, but I want to put that somewhere else. Essentially what you're doing. So just reorganizing the code, and some new possibilities will open up. So let's look at, before I even get to that, let's look at what that does to the code. So pretend that all this code didn't need to be here. And in fact, I'm going to like hit a lot of carriage returns, go far down here and leave it down here, and I'm going to comment it out so that it's not affecting anything. And I'm going to come back up here. And if I had a constructor function, I would be able to say something like this: new bubble. This is new syntax with the keyword new. What the keyword new it means is, hey JavaScript, make a new object. What kind of object? This bubble object. How do I know what a bubble object is? I'm going to write a special function called bubble somewhere else that will explain what a bubble object is. Generate it, make it, put it here so that it goes into the array. So, and what's wonderful about this is this beautiful, lovely, clean, sort of like succinct syntax. Like all of the code for the object is now somewhere else. We can see that the main program is just, let's start with an empty array, let's put a bunch of things in it, and let's make those things move around the screen and do stuff. And so with this, all that's left to do is define what it is to be that bubble object, to write this constructor function that makes that bubble object. So how do you do that? That's the next piece. So I want to come over here to the whiteboard, and oops, hit my button again. Oh, come on, button, there I am. So I want to come over here and talk about the syntax for that. So what I think a good way of looking at it is, okay, so we know how to write a literal object. A literal object, I'm going to kind of squeeze over here to have some extra room. I'm just going to say var b. A literal object is a collection of name-value pairs, properties. I have a property named x with a value of 100. I have a property named y with a value of 50. I have a property named display. And the value of this property, oh, it happens to be a function. And what do I do in that function? I draw an ellipse, I set a color. And if I want to refer back to a property of the object, remember I have to say this, another property, I have to say this.x. So this is the syntax that you're familiar with if you watch some of the previous videos. It's what I've used so far. So I'm going to draw a sort of magical line here. And what I want to do is look at, there's like a thing poking me. I don't have a lot. It looks like I'm in this big space here. Very cramped, camera, light. Thing poking me. So over here, what I want to do now is look at how do I make this with the constructor function? So the constructor function is a function just like any other function in JavaScript. So this syntax in a weird sort of way almost goes back to something that you might be a little more used to, but with some kind of strange other nuance and aspects to it. So to define a function in JavaScript, you simply write function, the name of that function, leave that blank for a second. If there are any arguments or parameters to that function, in parentheses, an open curly bracket, can you see that? Yes, and a closed curly bracket. So a constructor function is a function just like any other function. However, we intend to use this function in a special case by invoking the new operator. So I want to say new bubble, meaning I want to execute a function called bubble with the new operator to make a new object. So a convention in how you name constructor functions is to name it with a capital letter. Okay, so this is a function named bubble. I've named it with a capital letter simply to note in my code that this is a special function. It's the constructor function. The thing that JavaScript is looking for is that new operator. The thing that I have over here, it's going to invoke that constructor function, say, hey, constructor function, make a new object. And just convention-wise, so I can keep track of what's doing what in my code, I'm going to capitalize that and name that with bubble capital B. I made this video earlier and had no sound in it, and I really explained that much better in the previous video that no one will ever see. I'm going to keep going. Something else I'm going to do in this video is going to be better, I'm sure. Okay, so now, once this function is triggered with the new operator, JavaScript says, okay, I'm going to make a new object. Now, the first thing we need to do is say what properties go into that new object. This is where the keyword this comes in again. If I say this.x equals 100, what I've done is the new bubble object that this constructor has made, attach the property x to this bubble object. So in the same way that we added a property here saying x:100, the constructor function is making a new object and attaching x to that particular object, this object. So I can then also attach a y to it. And I can also, there goes the camera, I can also attach a function to it. And I know this, I'm going to go off the screen here, but so actually it's not a screen, this is a whiteboard, but let me actually write this a little smaller so you can see it. This dot display equals function. So you can see now, technical fail, but I'm just going to keep going here. This is already my second try. Look, by the way, that's the thing. This is the thing that was poking me. Just turn that. Okay, so you can see how this maps. This is making a literal object. Make this object be with an X, with a Y, with a display. This is in a way like a template. It's saying the object doesn't exist yet, but if you were to call this function with a named bubble, then an object will be created with these properties. X will be attached to that object, Y will be attached to that object, display will be attached to that object. So literal object, it exists, template, idea of an object, way of generating the object. When you say new bubble, the object is made. And you might think that at the end here, you would want to say something like return this. So once the object is made, you want to then send it back to where you wanted it to make, right? Here I say, oh, I lost the camera. Oh God. I'm going to have to remake this video again tomorrow, which I might do. Here I said new bubble. I want this to evaluate to that new object. The new object here, the reference to that new object is the keyword this. But the thing about a constructor function is this is like you don't have to say this. It's inherent to how once you invoke the new operator, that object will be returned. It's kind of unspoken. You don't have to say it. It happens automatically for you. So this is the syntax. One of the things you might practice, right, an exercise that I'll give you at the end, is take something that you made in a literal object and try to convert it to this constructor function syntax. This is a really hard, confusing thing to explain and possibly understand. Hopefully I'm doing a slightly okay job. So let's do that now in the code itself. Remember down here before, I sort of left my code I had for the literal object commented out. So now I can actually write that constructor function. So I'm going to say function bubble. And now, what are the properties? I had an X and a Y. So I need to say this dot X equals random, 0 to width. This dot Y equals random, 0 to height. So you can see instead of the literal syntax, I'm actually setting properties attached to this equal to the values. It's sort of more like code being executed line by line. And then I can add the display function. And I can add the move function. And I left a space here. And then the nice thing is I can go and grab these lines. These haven't changed. Those functions are exactly the same. And I know I'm doing this kind of quickly, like if you're following along, you can pause the video and try to sort of do this yourself. I will upload these somewhere and try to put them in the description on YouTube or Vimeo or wherever you're watching this. But you can see now, let me put a little line break here. You can see now this is the constructor function. This is a function whose sole purpose in life is to generate an object. When you say new bubble, that object is made, it's stored in the value this, X gets attached to it, Y gets attached to it, display gets attached to it, move gets attached to it. Unspoken at the end, that object, this object is returned where? Where did I say new bubble? Up here. What do I do with it? I put it in the array. Boom, boom, I don't know, it's a bubble, it pops. So this function, new bubble. Now notice, interestingly enough, I hate to do this to you, but if I said this would not work, right? The constructor function is a function like any other. It will be executed, but all sorts of things will break and not work. This only works, JavaScript is looking for that keyword new in order to know to make this a new bubble object and attach the properties to it. So I put this in here and I run it and we've got 4. And again, I've got this same magical thing. Now make 400 bubbles, so I'm like running out of steam here. So hopefully this, so there's, right now all I did in this particular example was take the literal object that I had in this loop up here and move it to a constructor function. So in the next video, what I would like to do is kind of show you what you could really do with this. Because now if I have this constructor function, I could say, when I click the mouse, also make a new bubble, And how do I add this to the array, right? So this is what we need to look at. I don't have to rewrite that. That constructor function can be reused anywhere in the code. So this won't work yet. This is the topic that I want to look at in the next video. And how do I maybe assign parameters to it, arguments to it? I want to make an object at this location, at mouse X, at mouse Y. So that's the topic I want to look at in the next video. For now, I would say if you want an exercise for yourself, go and find something. Maybe you watched the previous video and made a literal object in a loop. Take that literal object code out of the loop, write the constructor function, see if you can get to perform exactly the same way. Okay, so this is the end of this particular video. In the next one, I'll look at an array function called push and an array function called splice, which allows you to add things to an array and remove things from the array, so we can have a much more flexible system. Okay, and I'm going to hit stop now. Okay, so hopefully that actually worked. I swear, the first video was better, but it just doesn't have any sound. There's nothing I can do. Okay, everybody's gone. Constructor function always makes everybody go away. Okay, so I think it's getting to be 3:30. I've done this for an hour and a half now. I'm going to turn on some air. And let me look at my list now. Ugh, I kind of want to make that video again because I really feel it, but I think I'm going to leave it, obviously. That was nice of you guys. Okay. I think I'm going to at least do push and splice, and I'll have to leave these ideas 6 and 7 for another time. You know, maybe I'll get a second win, because I would love to just like knock all of these out today and then not worry about videos. By the way, the next set of videos will be about working with the DOM. HTML, CSS, P5 DOM add-on. But I got to do push and splice. So oops, I'm looking at Twitter for no reason. Okay, so if you have any comments or feedback, let me know. I'm sort of out of water here. My watch battery is dying. Batteries are dying everywhere. Let's check the battery of this. Still looks fine. Drink a little of this tea. Okay. So I'm going to erase this over here. So what I'm going to do in the next video is just look at push and splice. Splice takes something out of the array. I think you give it the index and then the number of things. So if you want to remove the third element, you say 2, and then you just want to remove only that element, comma 1. It's a little bit weird. It'd be nicer to have a remove function, but that'll do. And so here I am, and I'm going to minimize this, and come over here, and then arguments to the constructor as well. Okay, here we go. I can do this one. I have to pee, but I'll wait. I can make it through one more video, because I'm sure you all needed to know that. Okay. So if you watched the previous video about the constructor function, thank you for still being here and watching the next one, because that was a little bit rough. Maybe you actually watched the re-recorded one that I hope to make someday to kind of try to do a little bit of a better job here. But I have a promise to you, which is that I'm going to put my energy into this video, and I think this particular video is going to let you do some really interesting things with an array that weren't possible before if you haven't looked at some of the other functionality that you can do with an array. So what is that functionality that I'm talking about? Notice this example. So what's wonderful about working with objects in an array is, again, I have a single number right there. I change that number to 5. I run the code, there are 5 bubbles. I change that number to 500, I run the code, there are 500 of them. But what if I want to click, 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 and delete them? Or what if I want to click, 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 and add them? How do I resize, dynamically add or remove things from that array? Well, one of the nice things is, right here, no matter what I do to the array, this loop will only ever iterate over the current state of the array, right? Because dot length will dynamically always store the value of the array itself. So that's a great thing. That's the good news. And then in order to add and subtract things from the array, a nice technique for doing that is with two array functions. So one array function is called push. Another array function is called splice. Now, the truth of the matter is there are many array functions, and I will try to remember to include in the description below a link to a JavaScript documentation page that runs through all these functions. It might be a little scary, weird looking links, maybe you shouldn't look at it, but these are just two functions that I'm going to demonstrate to you. Now, the other thing that's a little bit weird is what a function for an array, what? Right? An array is this, right? Nums equals 5 to negative 30, 71. Right? What do you mean a function to the array? I could say nums index, so this is 0, 1, 2, 3. If I said nums index 4 equals 21, it's like I'm taking the end of this array and adding element 4 to the array and making it one longer. So this is a way to add an element to the array, but it only works because I happen to know what that index value is. I happen to know the length of that array. So a more convenient way might be to, no matter what, just say append it to the end or add it to the end. And the push function does that. If I say nums dot push 63, it will say whatever the size of the array is, extend it by one more and put the thing you just pushed onto it there. And I might have run out of space up there, but I think you can see it. Now this is what's weird. Yes, you can initialize an array. Yes, you can refer to individual elements, but you can call functions on it. What is the thing what is the thing you normally have that you say something dot execute a function, an object? So this is one of the things about JavaScript. You know how we made an array of objects? Well, guess what? An array is also an object. So, and by the way, we've seen this already. It has a property, the .length property. So this is what we normally think of as the array itself, and we're working with the values in the array, but an array happens to be an object, and there are special functions you can call on it. Push being one of the most, sort of convenient ones or useful ones for you right now, and I'll show you splice in a moment, which will allow you to take stuff out of the array. So let me come back over here, and now that we know that, I can do something to this code, right? If I can add the mouse pressed function, and here in the mouse pressed function, I can say bubbles dot push, and what? What do I want to push into that array? Right before, if I just had an array of numbers, I could just say push this number, or push some random number, or push some whatever. This is just numbers. Here, what I want to do is push a bubble object. How do I make a new bubble object? Well, that was what I spent all this time really trying my hardest to explain in the previous video. The job of making objects is left to this constructor function, which is being eaten by the blue blob. This constructor function, its job is to make an object. How do you trigger its action to make that object? By saying new bubble parentheses. So right here, all I need to do is say, hey, push a new bubble into that array. So now you're not really going to notice, are they popping up there? But let's start with just two bubbles. And I could click, and you can see every time I click, a new bubble is being added to that array. But I want to do better than that. Like what I want to do is I want to click right here, and I want to see the bubble being added right there. How do I do that? Well, let's look at how is its initial x and y picked. Its initial x and y is picked randomly. Now the truth of the matter is I could just replace that with mouse x and replace this with mouse y. But I'm using this as an excuse to show you something a little bit tricky about constructor functions, but ultimately rather useful. Functions can accept arguments. You can pass things into a function. I want to draw a line from this point to this point. I want to fill with these particular RGB values. I can say I want to make a bubble with this argument. I want to make a bubble that is big, or a bubble that is small, or a bubble that is red. I want to be able to modify the bubble as I make it. And in this case, I want to say, I want to make a bubble at mouse x, at mouse y. So let me come back over here. I erased my constructor function, but let's take a look at this syntax a little bit, because this is really hard. So I want to say new bubble, And right now I'm going to say instead of mouse x and mouse y, I'm going to say 50, 25. So this is the line of code I'm executing, right? And remember, the constructor function looked like this. Now, it didn't have anything between the parentheses. I'm going to add something in a minute. And then it said this dot x equals something, and this dot y equals something. What I want to do is I want to get this 50 into that x. And I want to get this 25 into that x. Why? When I make the new bubble object, I want to make it with these values. 50 should be its x property. 25 should be the value of the y property. How do I do that? Well, when you pass arguments into a function, those arguments get received by that function's parameters. So I need to add how many parameters here? 2 parameters, an x and a y. I can actually call those whatever I want. But a nice way that I might call them is I might call them x and a y. And you know why JavaScript won't get confused? Because these are called x and y, because these are referring to this bubble's x and this bubble's y, and these are just a plain old x and a plain old y. So if 50 goes into x, x now has the value of 50, x can go into this dot x. If 25 goes into y, y now has the value of 25, and y can go into this comma y. So these particular x and y parameters to the bubble function, they simply act as these like handoffs. They're just here, they're like waiting. Okay, give me a value. I got the value. You take the value. That's all they live for. That's their entire purpose in life in terms of this code, is just receive that value 50 and immediately handing it off. Because this is the x that really matters. That's the bubble's x. This is the y that really matters. That's the bubble's y. These are just temporary, just here to receive the value and pass it off. So let's come back. I'm sure you have a question, but you can't ask it. Let's come back over here and let's look at that. So I'm passing in the mouse x and the mouse y. I'm coming down here. I need to add those parameters to receive that mouse x and mouse y, and I need to assign those parameters to this dot x and this dot y. So this is exactly what I went through before. You can see now mouse x goes into x, which then goes into this dot x. Mouse y goes into y, which then goes into this dot y. Okay, here we go. Stop, start. And now when I click the mouse, 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 click the mouse. Look at that. Oh, that is lovely. It just works. And you know, I could do something like, I'm sorry, but I just have to make this a little bit nicer. Like, you know, let's give it like a little bit of some sort of color, you know, some alpha. And what I just realized though is what's weird. Like, look at this for a second. Shouldn't we have like 200 bubbles to start with? There's no bubbles to start with. Look at this. Even I rewrote the bubble constructor to expect parameters, but I didn't get any up here. I didn't get an error message, or maybe I did, but I can't see the error message. No, there's no error message. So the thing is, it tried to do it, but it didn't have the arguments, so we don't see those bubble objects. So this is important. If you provide arguments, parameters to your constructor function, you've got to use this. So, you know, I don't know what I want to do up here. I could put all of these starting ones at 100, 100, so they're all right there. I could put all these starting ones at a random location, right? I could pass the random location in, and I could do that. And now I kind of had what I had before. But ultimately, I think what I want to do in this example is just take this out. Like, now I have a program which just starts with no objects. It's fine to have an empty array. I can loop through that empty array. You know how many times I'm going to loop through that empty array? 0 times. And the only time I'm ever going to add a new object is if I click the mouse. Because when I click the mouse, I'll make a new bubble object at mouse x, at mouse y, and push it into the array. So that array grows. So I can click, 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 click. And something I could do that's kind of fun is I could change, I mean, fun if you're me, I guess, but I could change that from mouse press to mouse drag, which is sort of a nice little effect, meaning I can kind of like draw with this. And notice this kind of answers that question that you might have had in your head a long time ago, which is, what if, you know, if I don't draw the background, I get this nice trail, right? Because I don't erase the previous shapes that I've been drawing. Here now, I'm erasing the background, but I'm using an array to keep track of the history of everything I ever did with the mouse, and I'm making a new object for every one of those points. And you can see, even though you could probably come up with more interesting motion than this, even though I start with this pattern, that pattern quickly goes away as these objects start to move randomly around the screen. So I think, okay, but I was going to say, this is a great exercise for you. I think using this model, can you create an object, can you create an array that stores the history of the mouse as you move it around, and what types of kind of motion or changes of color or things can you do now if you have a drawing program that's actually rotating all of those locations in an array rather than just leaving them as pixels on the screen. But before I go any further, let's add one more thing to this. What if I only ever want to have 50? Like I want to delete I want to delete the oldest thing from the array, right? What I mean by that is if this is the array, right? The push function always adds things to the end. So first it adds like a bubble to the beginning, then it adds a new bubble to the next spot, then it adds a new bubble to the next spot, then a new bubble to the next spot. And once I get to a certain number, what if I want to delete the oldest one? Shift everything down. Delete the next oldest one, shift everything down, and keep adding. So the way to delete something from an array is with a function called splice. It's a little bit confusing though because this splice function expects two arguments. The first argument is the index of what you want to delete. So if I say index 2, and this was my array, 0, 1, 2, it would remove this element, and all of these would kind of shift down into the appropriate spots. This second argument is how many. So actually, if I said 2, 5, it would delete this and the next 4 elements. But in this case, I just want to remove one at a time. So I want to remove the element 2, and I want to remove the oldest one. So if I'm adding to the array, the oldest one is always in the first spot. So I want to delete the first element and just one of them. Okay? So let's come back here. And when do I want to do that? Like right now, I could say like, just for the sake of argument, key pressed, bubbles.splice, the first element 1, just that one element. So you can see now I'm going to add a whole bunch of them. And now we'll start hitting a key. You can see it's removing them in order of how they were added. But maybe what I really want to do is say something like, okay, if the bubble array ever gets greater than the value 50, then delete that first element. So what's that going to do? I'm going to keep making bubbles until suddenly I have 50 of them. I can keep making more, but keep deleting the older one. So if I ever have 50, delete and add a new one, delete the previous one. So you can see I sort of get this trail that kind of winds following me. So push, adding things to the array, splice, deleting things from the array. Now let me give you a challenging problem. And I really should make another video with the solution to this problem. I actually have one somewhere. But it uses processing, so I need to make a JavaScript one with this. But what if you don't want to remove these objects just based on their age, like when I get to 50, but what if you want to remove them if they ever happen to wander off the screen? Right? So look at this. Here's a bunch of objects. Leave them there, or remove them if they hit the edge of the screen, or if you click on them. So how do you pick specific objects to move based on some set of condition? That's a pretty difficult problem. This somehow has to be inside of the loop, but you got to watch out if you're looping through an array and modifying the elements of the array at the same time, weird things can happen. So that's something you can think about as a future problem. But just to get started right now, I might, again, work with this model. See what you can do with an object that sort of keeps track of an array that stores a history of what you've done with the mouse, or maybe you have something moving independently, randomly, and you're keeping track of a history of its location. Okay, so hopefully this helped you with a little more about objects and arrays, and I'm going to finish this video off now. Oh, this was 15 minutes long. That was long. Come on, mouse. I got to hit stop. Okay. Bubbles. Yeah, I know, Amelia. Hi, Amelia. It's always Bubbles. It's nice of you to be here. I like this weird little image of myself that's coming up. Okay. Any questions? Anybody still here? I'm definitely running out of steam. Let's see where I got to. I'm going to bring up my notes here. I got everywhere up to 6 and 7. And also, if I were to add another video here, really what I should do is like removing elements from an array when they leave the window. So I should really do a video on that. This is really 8 videos somehow now. So I did all of these, even though I feel like I didn't do a very good job. And I haven't done these. It's 3:45, kind of run out of steam. Anybody have any questions or comments before I go? I could do a couple more. If only I could get to all of them. Questions, comments, bubbles. I think probably I'm going to take a break and kind of remember this list. Maybe I'll come back in a few minutes even if I can I need to get some more water and stuff. Okay, so last chance, I'm going to count in my head to 15. If you're here, if you're watching, you have a comment or question, I'm going to shut the stream off in about 30 seconds, but I will stay if somebody has a question. Community spotlight of cool things people make with P5. That's a great suggestion. It's funny, I don't really think to do videos like that. I'd have to prepare for that. I just kind of wing these. But I think that's a great idea. And I'll try to keep that in the sort of back of my mind or on a list. I do have a list somewhere that I keep track of all the videos I'm intending to make. Thank you for that suggestion. So I'm going here to this. I'm going to click this stop streaming soon. It's only 53 minutes. Somehow I feel like I've been streaming for much longer than that, but who knows. I'll wait a little bit longer again. Thanks, helpful. Thank you. I'm glad you're finding this helpful. Okay, I'm going to stop streaming. You can send me a tweet at Schiffman. Email is out of control, but you're welcome to email me. I'll try to answer. And I will be back. If you follow me on Twitter, that's where I post the links to these streams. I might, if I can stomach it, because I have till 4:30 before I have to go, I might just take a 10-minute break and try to knock out a couple more. It would be a new streaming URL though, so you have to check for me to post that. So I might do that, but I might just have to wait till tomorrow or Monday. Okay, goodbye everyone, and please stay tuned for the future. Goodbye. Stop.